welcome everyone to APCO's community webinar for this week. The focus today is a deep dive on a PREP assessment. So PREP being the Packaging Recyclability Evaluation Portal, for those of you who may not be familiar with it. We have myself, Lily Barnett, the Program Manager at APCO, and I am accompanied by Dickie, who is the Project Coordinator at APCO as well. And then we have with us some special guests being Anthony Peyton from PREP Design and Adhi from Nestle. So thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks, Lily.
So as we said, today's focus is all about PREP. We are going to be taking you through some common frequently asked questions that we have. We are currently focusing on today how the weight and size can impact packaging recyclability. And the lovely Alex will be giving us a live demonstration from her home to show you how that all works. Anthony will also be giving us a live demonstration of how that works. And he will also be touching on our technical advisory committee that supports the PREP and APCO program. And last but not least, we will have a fantastic Adhi from Nestle, who has been using the PREP tool as a brand owner for some time. So we're going to hear a little bit of his perspective and some great feedback and tips and tricks as well. Before we jump straight into it and show you how it all works in practice, I just wanted to provide a bit of an overview as to what the Packaging Recyclability Evaluation Portal is and how that fits into our Australasian Recycling Label program. So what you can see here on your screen is an example of what the ARL on pack looks like in practice. Now, it may just appear to be a pretty recycling logo on pack, but there is a lot of background work that goes into that simple on pack clear label. Now, the first step of that is a brand must pop their packaging specifications into the PREP tool. So that's an online evaluation that will then provide a recyclability classification, which will then also correlate to an Australasian Recycling Label that can go on pack. So that's helping, the PREP tool is evidencing the recyclability claims that then can be made on pack. Now, this program couldn't be done alone. We share this work with PREP and PREP Design itself, as well as Planet Ark. So Planet Ark help with the education aspect directly to consumers as well as through local councils. And we have a marketing advisory committee that supports that process. So that is a group of experts which come together throughout the year and analyse how effective our consumer education campaign is working, as well as any new networks or areas that we can be focusing on. So that's a really important part of this whole ARL program. Then APCO administers the program to all of its members, and we also track that progress and compliance to make sure that the ARL is always applied correctly and is always applied with that packaging recyclability evaluation assessment as well. And to support this work, we have a technical advisory committee, another group of experts that help us assess all of the thresholds and parameters that are within PREP to make sure that that tool is as reflective as what is happening in the market right now. So the PREP tool hopefully seems quite simple and straightforward to a brand owner or a packaging manufacturer when they log in, but on the background there is a lot of technical work. PREP not only looks at what you can put in your curbside bin, but it also looks all the way through the recyclability chain. So we cover a series of aspects, as you can see on your screen there. It is what you can put in your curbside recycling bin, and that is covering all councils across Australia and New Zealand. It then simulates that being collected in a compactor truck and taken to a material recovery facility. The algorithm behind PREP simulates how that piece of packaging and all of its components would be tossed and turned around the material recovery facility. And this is what we'll be demonstrating today in terms of where aspects like size and shape and weight can really affect the recyclability of a material or a product. We then look all the way through into making sure that once that material is correctly sorted, it is also able to be recycled and reprocessed into a new material. So we look at all of the different material streams when they are being reprocessed and the markets that they have. So I will leave it there and I'll let Anthony pick up on a bit more of the technical detail later. But what I will do is hand over to Alex, and she is going to share her screen so that you can see an example of how a prep assessment would work. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Lily. I am now sharing my screen. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Yes, great. So I have just logged on to prep.org.au and this is your homepage. And for anybody that is calling from a council or not a brand owner perspective, you will see this page when you go to prep.org.au and there is a tutorial video here that you can watch that walks through the program in quite a lot of detail. And I am just going to jump into my projects. So this is my project and I am going to walk you through an example here. And so at the top of our page, we have our projects, our account. If you do want to change your password, you can do so here. For all our prep users, we also have our support tab that goes through information and updates. It's got some key FAQs in there as well. We also have our glossary, which is hyperlinked throughout our assessments, Prep Express, which gives a great quick table to reference for your recyclable and your not recyclable items. We also have a feedback function, so if you do have any questions, you can pop them right in there, and you can also get in contact with the team at APCO directly. We do have our red cycle table, so for our soft plastics assessments, we can assess our soft plastics through this process, and we also have some videos which go through a few training videos there for you as well. In the About page, this goes into more information about prep, and it also logs all of the changes that occur through prep. As an online platform, it is excellent in its ability to update as our system updates as well. And then this is our project. So when we start a project, we can give it a name. I've done this to help us save some time for today. We also can have a description and our reference. And our description and our reference, that can be anything to help a brand owner or an organization categorize and understand what they've assessed through their prep assessments, especially if this is more than one SKU that is relevant to this assessment. We also have product categories to help you sort and understand what products that you have assessed. And then, as Lily touched on, this is for both Australia and New Zealand, so we can select either or both of Australia or New Zealand for these projects. Jumping in, we have our separable items, so our packaging that consumers are separating to access the product. So in this example, we've just got a cardboard box, and we can jump into the actual items. So here we have, and I have run through this as well to help save time, but our first question is about hazardous contents, of which we have said no. We also then have our primary material, and I have selected cardboard. For our dimensions, it then mentions dimensions when crushed, so as if this item has been crushed, and we're simulating that part of when it gets collected is then taken through their compactor trucks and then taken to a material recovery facility. So I've entered our dimensions, and in this example, we're thinking of quite a rigid cardboard. It's not too big, but it's really quite rigid, so there is some depth to it. Its weight is 50 grams. There are no inks used on this item, and there are no secondary materials. So then we're going to go to our draft report. And our draft report is coming back and it's saying it's not recyclable. And it's saying that it's not recyclable for both Australia and New Zealand. And when we scroll down the page, it gives us information on why it's not recyclable, which is incredibly key to help you make those design decisions to help you improve packaging recyclability. So here we have quite a cool table that comes up and it says technical recyclability. And in this example, it's not technically recyclable, but it is widely accepted. Cardboard is widely accepted by councils, but because it's not technically recyclable, our overall result is not recyclable. And then looking at our issues text, it gives us the information that if the paper is not flat, so it's not 2D, it does not enter the paper stream at a MRF and will be discharged as waste. And I've picked this example today. It's quite a simple one as a cardboard box, but really to highlight that there is quite a complex process behind recycling, and we want to make sure that we are communicating this to consumers where we can. Scrolling further down the page, it also gives you information on what that widely accepted threshold to curbside status is. So because it's not recyclable, but it's a cardboard box and it is accepted at council, I know that through the Australasian Recycling Label, we have options for conditionally recyclable instructions. In particular, for this example, it's a flatten to recycle instruction. So to make sure that if I do tell consumers, if it's flat, that it is recyclable, I'm going to jump back into our overview page and I'm going to add a new component. And so I will just do that very quickly. Again, it's the same. It's a box. And then I go back into my items, and our second box, I add in all of those details. So it's no hazardous content, it is just cardboard, but our dimensions are now as if I've gone that extra step and I have flattened out that cardboard. So here it's 210 millimeters, it is 150 millimeters wide, and then the depth is 20 millimeters. And our weight, it is still the same 50 grams. It doesn't have any inks and it doesn't have any secondary materials. So now when I jump into our draft report, this second box is now recyclable. So what this is telling me is that if my consumers do follow this instruction to flatten to recycle, that box is going to be recoverable in the curbside recycling system. So I am now going to jump into the modify ARL page. And this is an exciting function, and it allows you to select those items that are deemed non-recyclable to be conditionally recyclable. And because I have done this second test with this box, I've verified that yes, if you do flatten it, it is recyclable. I know I can apply this instruction. So I am now going to say conditionally recyclable and flatten to recycle, and that's across both Australia and New Zealand. And when I scroll down my page, my new artworks look like this. I hit apply and they are updated. Down the bottom of the page, we also have the APCO user guide hyperlinked, and this is where you will find all of those instructions if you are ever unsure what they could be and what they applied for. And I also have the ability to hit or to click on the box here, and what it does is that then removes it from my final report. So we don't have two boxes in our one SKU, but we do have this second assessment here to verify that that flatten to recycle is applicable. So then when I jump into our final report, I only have that one artwork. It's got that instruction and I can save it. And that's a complete assessment. And I will now pass over back to you, Lily.
Thank you very much, Alex. That was a fantastic demonstration. Hopefully gave you some insight, everyone, into how to complete that new Modify ARL process. It is a new feature that we have brought in at the end of last year based on lots of feedback we got from all of our prep users. The integration of the ARL is a game changer. We are very happy to have it included in there to show that seamless transition between a prep assessment and then applying an ARL unpack. So thank you, Alex, and I will hand over to Anthony, who will now give us a little bit of a demonstration and a bit more information on how those packaging recyclability evaluations are assessed. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, Lily, and great job, Alex, on that little demo. I'm just going to take you through another example of the soft plastics module that we've just been set up a couple of days ago. All right, so as Lily mentioned before, we're not just looking at curbside collection, we're also looking at what happens in the MRF and the downstream markets. So there's 3 main macro tests that are done. Also, what we do with, it's not based on a bottled cap, it's all based on parameters and thresholds. So this is the job that the technical advisory committee do. So here's an example here. How small is too small for a plastic item is a parameter, one of the tests. An example of a threshold is less than 50 millimeters in 3 dimensions. So rather than sort of saying, so some caps might be large enough, like for instance on a jam jar, for instance, they might be large enough, whereas a small cap on a bottle might be too small. So we allow for that sort of factor in the assessment. The other point here in terms of doing the prep assessments for all materials that go through the assessment, rather than being just a binary aspect here in terms of from the technical side of things, we also look at it from the point of view of 3 layers. It could be classified as technically recyclable, or technically recyclable with lost value, or not actually recyclable. Now, the middle point there is an interesting one because we're talking about really a transition between, I suppose, black and white or good and bad. It's in the middle there somewhere. And it's very important for brand owners sometimes when you're designing packaging, for instance, in terms of increasing shelf life, or it might be some other factor in terms of laminates on materials that are there for food hygiene type reasons, that it may not be as recyclable as something else, but we still call it technically recyclable with lost value. So if you've got either points 1 or 2 in your assessment, then you can call that recyclable to the consumer. So that middle point there is a feedback to the brand owner, is not applicable to the consumer. Lily also mentioned the TAC. The TAC's been operating now for 2 years, and what intrigues me is that after 2 years of meeting on a monthly basis with these experts from across the supply chain, our meetings still go for an hour and a half, 2 hours. There's still so much to look at. The granularity, it's just, I know, it's amazing. We're talking about CPET now, we're talking about PET glycol, we're talking about inks. Something always new comes up. We want to try and make this as accurate as possible, and that's the job of this group here. We talk about things, we have subcommittee meetings, we put forward proposals, we go out for more evidence if we need it, but it's an amazing process we've been going through, and I really appreciate the people who have been on the TAC the last couple of years, and more recently, it's incredible what we're achieving in this process. So what I'll do now is I'll just share with you an example of the prep itself. This example here will be on it for soft plastics, and it's using the RedCycle module that's now available to members of RedCycle. So same sort of structure as Alex went through. He will have a plastic bag. Now point here, this list here are all the approved names of components that will appear on the ARL. So we go into the bag item. In this case, same sort of question about hazardous contents. Here we've got talking about, say, might be a LDPE bag. Now, what will happen here is as we click soft, this is where the new module pops up because we're talking about a soft plastic. The new version that started this week allows packaging designers to either assess their laminate structures based on the thickness of the laminates or based on the GSM. Now, with this assessment, if you go, when we were talking about before, Alex was talking about this RedCycle table. This looks at the thresholds that are acceptable in the RedCycle system. So I want to look at one as an example. If we've, for instance, got an LDPE bag with a PET laminate, the limit here is 30%. So any more than 30% by weight is classified as not recyclable in the RedCycle system. So I want to look at that one as an example, remembering that we're looking now by weight, not by thickness. So if we go back to this project and open up the items, we'll come down here and it's just refreshing, is it? Let's put it in again. LDPE. Now, if this example here, we're saying it's soft. So let's start by doing it by thickness. So if we're saying we've got, say, an LDPE as the primary laminate, and let's say we've got the PET. So now if we put in here, say 71 microns and 29 microns, because we're measuring this based on thickness, it's less than 30% based on the thickness, but if we go to the report, we'll see it's not recyclable. And that's because PET has a higher specific gravity than LDPE. Therefore, on a weight basis, it's above the 30%. So another way we can do this, if you have data for the GSM, so if we might say then, let's click it as grams per square metre. Now the heading changes. So now we put it in, let's say 71 grams per square metre and 29 grams per square metre for the PET. On a weight basis now, we can see that less than 30%. So we get the result and it's a recyclable bag. Same as before, as Alex demonstrated, if we go to the ARL now for this product, we can come through, we can select as return to store for this particular one. We can apply that and that comes through into our final report. And you can see here now, if you see that report, that is demo 3. The key thing, one of the changes we've got here as well, when you download the PDF document for this report and you go down to the bill of materials, this now includes what you've entered. So you entered LDP as the primary material and PET as the secondary. So that concludes my demonstration. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony. A very exciting new addition to the prep tool. So thank you very much for demonstrating that and providing a little bit more insight into the Technical Advisory Committee and those decisions. I'd like to welcome Adhi from Nestle. He has been a prep and ARL champion working through all of this from the very start, and we are going to hear his perspective of how Nestle works through these evaluations. So over to you, Adhi.
Yeah, thank you for having me today. So for today, I'd like to show you a couple of examples from a few packaging design projects that I've worked on to showcase how helpful prep it is in our packaging design, and also some useful hints and tips from our experience.
Sorry, Adhi, it's a little bit hard to hear you. We might get you to move a bit closer to your camera, to your audio. Yep. That's a bit better.
Is it better now?
Yes, that's a bit better. We might just get you to speak up as well. Thank you.
Yep, no worries. Cool. So yeah, the next slide. The first example I'd like to give you is a project that I worked on for a e-commerce packaging solution. So the brief for this is quite simple: to deliver KitKat across Australia through a standard courier without chocolate melting and with recyclable packaging format. So on the right here, you see the completed prep report that I've done. It's definitely not the first version. We went through a lot of revisions, but it may seem a bit daunting as well because it's a few number of different packaging materials. But if you follow the way that you input the materials, as Alex and Anthony has gone through, it really is quite straightforward. Sorry, but I think there's some trouble hearing. Let me try to get another headphone.
Is that better now?
That's much better. Thank you, Adhi.
Yep. Okay. Sorry about that. Cool. Now, so the one thing that I do want to highlight with inputting prep materials is that if you will need to get some specific packaging information from your suppliers that they may not provide normally. So things like types of ink, varnishes, or materials engaged for some of your soft plastic laminates. So you'll need to get those information. So I just want to go through some of the individual components here. For the shipper, we have a similar example as what Alex has gone through. When you put the cardboard as it is, and it is in a 3-dimensional format, it will come up as not recyclable because it will go into landfill. So we need to apply the flatten to recycle instruction there on the ARL. We also have the padding material inside there as well, and that one has been specifically chosen with the help of prep to have a padding material that is curbside recycling ready. Then we have the divider and the tissue paper to replace the use of bubble wrap for curbside recyclable format. And we also have the ice pack as well, which was specifically chosen based on the REDcycle table that Anthony has gone through to make sure that it is acceptable through REDcycle. So the liner material here is a mixture of polypropylene and polyethylene. So now, we used, at the beginning of the project, we basically involved prep very early on in the stages of the packaging design. When I received samples from my suppliers, one of the first things that I did was to put this into prep because recyclability is such a big factor for this design. So now you have the prep report with your ARL logos. We can now put this into artwork. And as you can see, if it comes up, the artwork is not too different from the prep report. We just copied the ARLs over into the artwork. But what you've noticed is that we've added a couple of additional information. Firstly, we included our brand messaging into this artwork. The KitKat brand messaging of "Have a break, have a KitKat," we changed it to give the planet a break. We thought that this engages the consumers to allow them to relate to our sustainability message a bit better. And you also notice that there is a bit of a blurb underneath the RedCycle logo there. And that's just an instruction to our consumers on how to recycle the material a bit better, and also to encourage the consumers to reuse the packaging. So that's our first example. And the next one is another example to illustrate how you should be thinking of your packaging materials a bit differently to how you normally would. So when you're making a prep report, you have to put yourselves in the consumer's shoes. You shouldn't be thinking of it as a purchasing standpoint or a production standpoint in the filling line. You need to really simulate how a consumer will be interacting with the packaging and how they will dispose of it. So in the example of the infant formula tins, from a purchasing or production or even a packaging design point of view, you would think that the foil and the tin itself is one type of material because that's how the suppliers provide that material to us. But if you consider it on how the consumers will actually use the packaging material, they will be ripping off the foil to access the product to get it to the powder, and they will most likely be disposing of that foil separately to the tin. So therefore, when you are assessing this product or this packaging material, you have to consider the foil and the tin as two separate items. Additionally, with the lid, it's the same case because the suppliers provide us as a single piece. You would think that it's one item, but the consumers actually brief off that temporary evidence tab into two separate pieces. So they will be disposing of those in two separate items. So you also need to put those as separate items in prep. So then when we input this into prep, we notice that the tab is actually not recyclable due to its size, similar to what Anthony was talking about. Prep actually assesses the size as well as the material for recyclability. And this is one of the great advantages of prep because it allows us to understand packaging as individual components, not as just one whole product. One of the other things I'd like to mention is that the foil is actually make into bowl, so conditionally recyclable with the make into bowl statement. The reason for this is that when recycled in the flat format, the foil will actually behave like paper and will travel into the murk into the wrong stream. So it will not be recycled correctly. But when formed into a bowl, like in the picture that just showed up, the density of the aluminium will help it to fall into the correct stream. Now, the reason we use make into bowl as the instruction instead of scrunch into bowl, which is the other approved conditional instruction by APCO, is that when we assess this foil material and we try to scrunch it ourselves, the foil material is quite thick and actually can create some sharp edges. So we agreed that the term make instead of scrunch from a consumer point of view is a better word for this purpose. So these three examples from one single product has showcased to us that you really do need to grab a sample of your product or even get someone or your supplier to play around with it and tell us exactly how consumers would dispose of it, because it's really important to get the right information so that we can get the correct ARLs to put on artwork. Right. So the previous slide, we talked about how our consumers dispose of packaging items separately, but the opposite is also true. So we also have to consider that consumers will sometimes dispose of some packaging items together. So we have an After 8 product here to showcase that, and it is an imported product from the UK. Because it is an imported product, we have to apply a label on it to make sure that it's compliant with our local regulatory requirement. And when we split into this product into the separable components, we have the box, we have the individual nip pouch, the dividers, and also some of the outer film wrap and the sticker next to it. Now the film is made out of polypropylene and the sticker is using a paper substrate. Since consumers do not remove the sticker from the wrap to access this product, they usually just tear off the wrap and put it in the bin or in the recycle bin. We can't expect them to treat them as separate items. We have to group them together as one piece of packaging, even though they are two very different pieces made of different materials. So when we first did this prep report, unfortunately, we were not able to claim recyclability on the paper itself, because the paper itself was actually affecting the recyclability of the polypropylene. So this is not acceptable in REDcycle because, as Anthony shown you before, the paper threshold is over 30%. Therefore, it will contaminate the polypropylene material. So after knowing this fact, we have actually moved on to a polypropylene substrate for our sticker. Now, the polypropylene is now matching with the outer film and is allowing it to go into the REDcycle recycling. So this is another important thing to consider in packaging as to how it will be disposed, not on how it will be purchased or how it will be used in the production line. A supplier may say that the paper sticker is recyclable, or the film supplier may say the polypropylene film is acceptable in REDcycle. But when put together, they may not necessarily be compatible and they may contaminate one another. So this is another good example of how prep can pick up some minute details in your packaging design to help you design your packaging better for sustainability. Now, the last piece of advice I would give to you is more on safekeeping, so on document control. For Nestle, we have come up with a naming system for our prep reports to give into them so that they are easily identified in the project's page. So this gives us a systematic way for us to search our products in the prep system, which is really necessary when you have over 2,000 products over Australia and New Zealand and over 20 users. So when you have different people with different ways of doing things, you can imagine everyone will be doing their own ways of naming the prep reports. You'll come back in a year's time and trying to figure out what this plastic bag that someone that's left your company is referring to. So it's important to have a good naming system. I also want to show that for the description and the reference tabs or the fields, it's good to put in whatever additional information you have with the product or packaging material. So putting this, one important piece of information that I've asked our packaging technologists to put in is the ARL applied date. So this is important because sometimes there's a bit of a delay between when you complete your prep report to when it is being produced, being applied onto artwork and actually appears to our consumers. So having that a record is good. The reference field can also be used to input whatever product number or barcode, which is very helpful when you have a packaging sample in hand, or any artwork or packaging numbers that you want to reference to your packaging specifications. Now, the great thing about Prep's search function at the projects page is that you can actually search in all of these fields. So be it project name or product description or product reference. So if, for example, you want to go back to a prep report and you have a sample in hand, you can just type in the barcode number, given that you put in the barcode number in the reference field, and it will show up in the prep report in the search functions. That's really helpful. So having quick and easy access to the reports can help in a number of ways. So firstly, for packaging technologists, they can come back to previous reports, whether it be for non-recyclable items that they need to fix, or to copy over some of the specifications for new packaging design. For marketing, to have a better technical understanding on recyclability and for them to create marketing claims that can better represent the product. For consumer services, so packaging sustainability is one of the highest topics of discussions with our consumers. We have significant amount of contacts from our consumers who would also like to know more about recycling and their packaging. So having this information is really important for them to give them in-depth references to, for example, why some ARLs are the way that they are, or if the ARL hasn't been applied yet, they can answer some of the questions that our consumers would have. And finally, for auditing purposes, so having all your documents in one spot is easy, that is easy to search, is very useful in an audit setting. You know how stressful those can be. So that's all I have for today. I'm sure you'll find some more learnings as you play around with the tool. It is quite versatile, so you can use it the way you want it, but my advice to you is just to be very certain with the inputs, and it is representing how the materials are being disposed. Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Adhi. Some fantastic real-life experience there, which is extremely valuable. Hopefully, the other brand owners on the line can relate to that and hopefully got some really good tips. I know I definitely got some out of that. We will now move on to the Q&A proportion of today's webinar. So it's great to see lots of questions coming through, but I encourage you to keep popping more in there as we go, and I will hand over to Alex, who will moderate those questions through to Anthony, Adhi and myself.
Absolutely. So we've had quite a few questions come through, and yeah, keep popping them in the chat, everybody. And if we do not get to you today, or if you have any other specific questions that you'd like to get in touch with the team on, please don't hesitate to contact us. We are available at arl@packagingcovenant.org.au, as well as APCO, as well as if you're talking to us, please don't hesitate to just pop it an email and we'll pass it on to the team. So our first question coming through, this is maybe for you, Lily. It's asking about where the packaging component names come from, and do we always have to use the approved component names?
That's a good question. So related to the ARL, as you would have seen in some of those examples, that we do call out the specific component name for each separable component of a packaging material. So those component names are off a select list. They have been worked through per material type, per common formats. And the idea of having specific component names is so that we can keep that consistency of the program and consistency with the ARL. So as you complete a prep evaluation, all of those approved component names that are available in your user guide are now available within prep. So we do ask that everyone uses those component names as stipulated in the user guide as well when you're applying the ARL. The other aspect is if you are working through it and you may have a unique packaging type and none of those component names fit your type of packaging or your separable piece, you are welcome to email us, and we can always add new component names as more packaging types are using the ARL. The best way to do that is to get in contact through the ARL at Packaging Covenant email, and we all those component names work through our marketing advisory committee to make sure that from a consumer perspective that makes sense for them as well. As Adhi reiterated, we always have to think about how the consumer is viewing that piece of packaging or that component, just to make sure that that's really clear for them. So a great question, and always have a look at the user guide.
Great, thank you, Lily. And we'll pop a link in the chat for everybody on where you can find that user guide. And we appreciate it's a big document, but it's got all those requirements in there for you, and it is very helpful when you're going through this process. I do have a question for Adhi now. So what has the feedback been from consumers on the use of the ARL?
I think that a lot of the feedback from our consumers has generally been very, very positive, especially for when we started putting them in, and we had the first round of our ARL being applied on artwork. The first products that we applied on actually was the Allen's product, so they contained the Recycle logo as well. And it has been really good for everyone to have a better understanding of how to recycle their packaging. And obviously, there still needs to be a bit more widespread understanding of recycling, but we're here to help them with that through the ARL. So it's been very positive, which is good.
Great, thank you, Adhi. And another question coming through. So if you have multiple SKUs that use the same packaging, do you enter all of the product numbers and barcodes into the reference field? And maybe I'll open this up for anybody in the team that would like to answer.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
So we have, in Nestle, we actually extract a lot of our information into an Excel spreadsheet because it gives us a better flexibility in terms of how we'll be reporting and a bit of data analysis as well. It also helps us keep track of, in terms of timings to some of our commitments that we have in sustainability. So this particular tracker contains basically all the SKUs that we have in Australia and New Zealand. And it contains the barcode information in there as well. So if you'd like to do that with your products, it's definitely very helpful to do that. But what I was trying to say before with the prep reports is to maybe with the barcodes, you can put in the reference for all your particular SKUs in there. It's just going to be much more helpful if you have leave the field blank, for example, because then you at least have some sort of reference to go back to later on.
Great, thank you, Adhi, for that insight. And I have another question here for you, Lily. Any rules regarding the size of the conditionally recyclable message for a micro ARL?
Yeah, definitely. So again, within our user guide, we have a style guide, which references that application of the ARL in terms of the text size that you have to use, as well as if you are using a micro ARL, it is only applicable to small items under 100 millimeters. Is that correct, guys? Yes.
100 square centimeters.
100 square centimeters. So it has to be a very small piece of packaging for it to be applicable to use the micro ARL. So we do reference you to the ARL user guide in terms of following all of those style guide requirements when putting that on pack. And that's all about making sure that it is legible for a consumer to be able to see that printing on the pack and make sure that they can see how to recycle that product.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lily. And a question for you, Anthony. In the prep tool, does it consider the types of inks, coatings, and varnishes that could affect recyclability on materials such as cardboard and paper?
Yes, Alex, thanks for the question. Yeah, it does do that. Some inks are problematic for paper products. So late last year, we put reference to UV inks, and that's now classified as recyclable with lost value, as an example. So yes, it does. A lot of work's been done in Europe in this space, so we're might some changes shortly, but yes, it does.
Great, thank you. And another question here, since this new update on report for soft plastics, does this affect the red cycle approval steps? So previously the report was missing soft plastic information and there was a separate table, and now it's integrated into the assessment itself.
Yeah, so the prep report that you receive for each project is the input data that you did for that project. But also the report will have the final result, whether it's suitable for the red cycle system, and then you'll have the white Mobius loop saying return to store or store drop off. So that's combined in the final report now, input data and also the final result. And then you refer then to that table I showed you under the support button that shows the thresholds.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that one that really the main difference here is that we've just streamlined the process. So in terms of making sure, as Adhi said, having all of that documentation in one place for an audit process, we're streamlining that to make sure it is all in one place. You don't have to jump around between tables and logging that information separately. It's now all included under your prep evaluation. So that's really the main difference there, to make sure that that's an efficient process for everyone as they're going through, but still the same process in terms of applying your ARL and making sure it meets those thresholds to then classify for the ARL on pack.
Great, thank you, Lily. And another question here for you, Lily, is Adhi mentioned that there was a choice between using the make into the ball or a scrunch into ball. Do we need approval from APCO in deciding which one is best?
No, so this really is up to the brand owner, and these conditionally recyclable options have come up as more and more brands are using them. So this one came down to, as Adhi said, it was a safety concern. So it really is up to the individual brand that is making that claim to make sure that they're providing safe information to their consumers. The main thing, as Alex demonstrated, when you're using a conditionally recyclable instruction, they are all approved and within the user guide, and they are also now available within PrEP, is to make sure that if you are using that conditionally recyclable option, that you have double checked that once the consumer completes that action, it actually does allow the item to be recyclable. So as Alex had shown, it was to 3D, and we had to make sure that cardboard item was 2D enough to make sure it was recyclable. And in Adhi's example, we did need those instructions, and he checked that to make sure that when it was scrunched, it would be recovered. So all of those approved additional instructions are available in the user guide, but just make sure you double check that they help pass those thresholds in PrEP.
Fantastic, thank you, Lily. Another question coming through, could you please elaborate more on the second category of recyclability, which is that technical recyclable lost value? So how does anything come into the idea of coloured plastics? And I might pass this one on to Anthony.
Yeah, sure, Alex. So that's a good example there with PET. At the moment with PET, there's 3 layers of PET. There's natural PET clear, there's transparent coloured, and there's opaque PET. So at this stage, the TAC has classified the clear PET naturally as naturally recyclable. The second one, coloured transparent, is classified as recyclable with lost value. And the opaque PET is classified as not recyclable. And so that middle one there is saying that whilst you will recover it and it will be a market for that material, the amount paid for that bale of coloured PET will be lower than you'll get for a clear PET.
Great, thank you, Anthony. Another question, and I might pass this one to you again, Anthony, is how do we account for the differences in what councils do and don't accept, particularly the data that we're collecting in PrEP?
Yeah, sure. So Planet Ark has been, since 2007, has been doing surveys of all the councils in Australia in terms of what's acceptable at curbside. And so what we've been doing each year, we now put that information into PrEP as part of the that first step about how widely something is collected. And as Alex showed in her presentation, that threshold's at the bottom of the PrEP report. So if it's greater than 80% of the curbside population, it's classified as widely accepted. If it's between 60 and 80% in Australia, it's called less widely accepted. So that's a threshold number that comes up in terms of how widely accepted. Now, in that middle classification of 60 to 80, the on-pack message would then say check locally. Now, similarly, the information has been collected by waste mins for the New Zealand councils over the last few years. And so it's the same sort of thing. So we may have a variation between a classification in New Zealand and Australia, but we can account for that on the ARL. So it might say, for instance, check locally in NZ as an example.
Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. And a question here for you, Lily. What if I have a soft plastic and one of the materials isn't captured in that thresholds table?
Oh, that's a good one. You definitely should let us know if there's something that you're using that hasn't been captured in there. We have tried to make sure we're covering all polymers. It may be a case in terms of what REDcycle can accept that it may be within one of those other polymers that are in there, but do always just let us know if there's something you're using and you're unsure how to input it into PrEP. As we've said, we've tried to cover as much as possible, but we are covering a huge range of packaging formats and lots of material types. So if you're ever unsure, always do let us know. And as Alex touched on, that is the benefit of something like PrEP. It isn't a stagnant document. It is something that is ever evolving and that can adapt to new materials coming to the market or as recycling markets change as well. So always let us know. The other aspect of that is that the REDcycle module in PrEP is just reflecting what the REDcycle program can accept. So always do get in contact with REDcycle themselves to clarify that additional information if you like. I might get one of the girls to put the REDcycle email in the chat box so that everyone has that one as well.
Great, thank you, Lily. And a question here, it's interesting to learn that anything less than 50 millimeters in any 3 dimensions will go to waste and be non-recyclable. I didn't think the packaging that matter if the material is supposed to be 100% recyclable. So this a question to Adhi, how do you estimate compacted dimensions of packaging?
Yeah, so with this one, we actually try to stand on the material. So the compaction is actually a good simulation of doing that is to just put some weight onto it. One of the more recent projects that we did was in PET bottles, PET cups that is being used for iced coffee. We just tried to decide whether this material is recyclable or not based on its flattened dimension. We just basically stepped on it. We found that it flattened pretty much almost immediately, and that's what the information we put into PrEP for that particular material. So sometimes you just gotta get a sample and play around with it and really simulate how it's going to work out in the recycling process.
Just a point, Alex, with that threshold that I gave in my presentation for the small plastic, that's a threshold for aluminium and steel. So you can have like a smaller cap, like if it's metal or if it's aluminium, or like a wine cap or a bottle top, that's recyclable, but plastic's not.
Yeah, so I think it's a really good point as well in terms of raising that sometimes we're unaware that these things can't move through the recovery process, and why it is so important to understand not only what can be collected at curbside, but also how those materials move through a material recovery facility. And it's something that we always encourage brands to educate themselves more and more on. There are, you may not be able to go and visit a MRF at the moment, but there are lots of videos online. We, through the Prep tool, try and simulate that ecosystem and how that works, but there is a lot going on in the background. And if you haven't seen how a MRF works in practice, once you watch a video and see all the materials flying around, you'll understand why those small items are so hard to be recovered through a MRF, and why there are so many aspects that come into recyclability. So a quick tip, if anyone's never had a look at that before, do go and have a look on YouTube and see what's out there. I saw we had some Cleanaway representatives on today, and they've got lots of great resources as well. So do always have a look into all these other areas to help educate yourselves in terms of how these materials are affected in their recovery.
Great, thank you, Lily. And I am just aware of the time, so we're nearing 3 o'clock. So we just wanted to say thank you again for everybody joining us on the line, and also our presenters today. Thank you, Anthony, Adhi, and Lily. If you do have any other questions, feel free to send them through, and we will be in touch with the team. And just to let everybody know, that our next webinar, which will be next Wednesday, is on the importance of the packaging sustainability strategy and an action plan. So that is coming up next Wednesday, same time, different people. It'll be great. Come along. And I will now pass on to the team, and we're just going to do a quick poll just to understand how you found the webinar today, and it will help us with our webinars moving forward. But just a thank you again, everybody.
Yeah, big thank you, Anthony and Adhi, for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your insights. So thank you very much. And
thanks, guys.
And as we said, pop any questions in the chat box. If you've got your name in there correctly, we know we can get straight back in contact with you to make sure we answer all those questions. So thank you very much, everyone.